Here is the trick to using this epoxy. You got to fill the cracks with sand. Pretty much that simple. You keep a hammer, right, so that you can kind of force that to settle down into the crack. You want to get as much sand in there as possible. The more sand you use, the less epoxy you need. And that epoxy is $4 an ounce. So it's not cheap. So you only want to use what you need. Okay, so here's the trick for removing the excess sand. You just want to take a nice soft bristle paintbrush and just so if the crack is north to south, you kind of want to go like, you know, like southeast, you know, kind of in other words, cat-a-cornered across it, and that's going to leave the most amount of sand in the crack. So I think that's a fairly sizable little hole there. Also, angling the brush, not like this, but like this, also helps to leave the sand in the crack. Doesn't have to be perfect, but you want to have that crack to where it's not going to absorb all your epoxy. Highly recommend a dripless caulk gun, which I'll put in the description. If you drip any, like I just did there, it's not a problem. You're gonna grind this off anyway, and it's not a problem to grind off that little bit, those little drips. They will come right off of there. So for me, what worked really well is just putting very little on here. You can see how thin it is. It's about like pancake syrup. And you don't want to go too deep into the crack. Just want to kind of stay above it if possible. Not a problem if you do, but better to not disturb the sand. And that little bit that's there is going to absorb into the sand, and the concrete is going to bond them all together and seal them so that the next coat will actually stay there where you put it. It will be above the level of the concrete, and then you can grind it smooth. This works well if you're doing an epoxy finish. That's what you want a really smooth surface for. So here's what it looks like after it's sat for a bit. The sand and the concrete have drank up the epoxy, and it's now sealed and bonded. And so then later we'll go over that with another coat, and that'll fill it up, and we can grind it smooth. Okay, so we're going on with the second coat here. It doesn't take much. Okay, so I'm just going on with the second coat. Here's some stuff here that has been sitting for over an hour, and you can see how it's pooled up on the top. The crack's no longer absorbing it. So this will be able to ground, be ground smooth. So it can be either painted or covered over. So this is a spot where it's a big fill, like it's really quite large. And it's sand and epoxy, and it is rock hard. Kind of see that where it's above the, again, it's hard as a rock, and then that will be ground flush with the rest of these. These were all trouble spots I had that seeped through in the first fill coat. First we had the seal coat, then the first fill coat usually does it, but there's a few spots here and there that it seeped through and I had to come back and hit it again, and or add sand and hit it again. But it works out in the end. Sometimes it's necessary to take this, even though it has a bag in it, the fine dust will get on the inside of the bag. Just drop it like that, that'll make it all come off and it'll start sucking properly again.